I see a big attendance rate today. That's amazing to see. Of course, you're all able to send reactions throughout if there's anything you like or dislike from John. And we also very much encourage you all to ask questions throughout this webinar. You're able to do that, as you see on the screen, by clicking the little icon down in the bottom right. It's actually changed since then, but now it's these kind of 9 dots in like a grid. You simply open the Q&A and ask away. You can ask anonymously or with your name, and then we'll do a Q&A session afterwards. But with that said, and without further ado, I give you John.
Hello, hey, nice to see a lot of you here. Some of you perhaps from last time, because we did actually host a webinar. This is a part 2 in a 3-part webinar series that we're doing. But welcome everyone, nice to see all of you. So welcome to UI Sound webinar. What makes a great sound, UI sound? It's a good question and we're going to answer that today. I'm John Cleworth, creative lead and UX UI specialist at Sonic Minds. So we create a lot of these UI sounds here at Sonic Minds in Denmark. I'm also a sound designer, of course, and I've designed countless UI sounds for different brands and so on and so forth, products. But yeah, so in this webinar, we kind of discuss what goes into making a great UI sound. As I said, today is part 2 of a 3-part series where we discuss the fun topic of making emotionally appealing sounds. So it's that emotional topic we're talking about today. It's going to be fun. I'll be making some sounds, weird sounds, funny sounds, hopefully, with my mouth. And you'll also hear some sounds you might recognize along the way. So it should be fun. And as Anton mentioned, write the questions you may have along the way, and we'll answer those at the end. Great. So just a quick agenda before we move ahead. What we're going to talk about today is, firstly, I'll talk about why UI sounds are important for your product. We've got a mix of people here today, but generally we're going to be talking about, just holistically. I hope this talk applies to a lot of you with your different practices. But we'll start by talking about why UI sounds are important. Then we're going to talk about where to start, when making UI sounds. Where do we actually begin the process? Then we'll talk about how to create emotionally appealing sounds. That's the meat of it. And then finally, we're going to talk about creating UI sounds that match your product personality. So big stuff, interesting stuff, and I hope it all makes sense. So why UI sounds? Why are they important? Why do we need them in our products? Well, as a lot of you are probably aware, because you were actually in this webinar, so you know the power of sound somewhat, which is actually great to know. But I must iterate that we choose and evaluate brands and products as much with our ears as with our eyes. Although kind of subconsciously, right? So we consciously judge or evaluate or choose products with our eyes, right? We know we go into a store, I don't want the red, I want the blue. I don't want the gloss, I want the matte finish, whatever it might be. That's, of course, I'm talking about physical products here, but it applies to digital experiences as well. But what we also do subconsciously is evaluate these same brands with our ears, how they sound. Now, it's very important to take care about how you sound as a brand or a product, because if you sound generic, you're, of course, going to be perceived as generic, which is, of course, nothing you want, right? Whereas if you care about the sound and how your product sounds, it also, in turn, shows you care about the customer. You care about design, right? And there's a knock-on domino effect with that. And that's why so many brands are actually catching on to UX, UI sound and implementing it more and more these days, we see. So why invest in sounds? Well, there's 5 big reasons, I would say, why it's really crucial. First up, as we probably know, it improves usability. So UI sounds, they provide that instant auditory feedback when you're tapping, the button sounds, confirmation sounds, something's gone correctly in the experience. Notification sounds when you're away from the product, say. We know and love these sounds, right? Or hate some of them, I must say. But yeah, the UI sounds, they make interactions easier. And when they make interactions easier in a product, it kind of builds trust in the user, right? Confidence in the product, which is all very good things. Second most important thing, or why we should invest in UI sounds, is the emotional connection. So as we all know, or as all of you know, because you're here at the webinar, music and sound is highly emotional. It impacts us whether we know it or not, right? Consciously or subconsciously. Highly impactful medium sound is. So it means that we can reinforce the brand personality, right? We can create an emotional connection with our product to the user very, very efficiently and easily with utilizing sound. So these emotionally impactful products or experiences that I'm sure a lot of you have experienced, say Netflix, say the power or the entry sound, the doo-doo sound, right? We kind of know and love that, right? It's memorable, it's valued, it's loved by the Netflix viewers. So that's just an example of the power of this emotional connection. Next up, UI sounds, they can reduce the cognitive load, right? So UI sounds, they help us interpret what's happening around us without us needing to interact with the product closely. So we don't need to look at the product. We don't need to read. I'm not looking at my phone, by the way. I'm using this as a prop, just so you know. But we don't need to always look at the product and read what's happening or see what's happening. Cool thing about sound is you can hear it while you're away from the product, right? So this is really helpful in stressful environments, say. So you're in the car, right? You're driving, you go to a corner, and then you want to indicate, you turn that indicator thing, and then that classic chick-chock, chick-chock sounds happens. Why is that there? It's because you want to have your eyes on the road, right? Hopefully. You don't want to have to look and say, is the indicator on right now? Oh, okay, I can see the little green light. Yes, it's on. No, you want to keep your eyes on the road. So that's why you use an indicator sound. So it reduces the stress, the cognitive load, right? You sit there and you can just keep your eyes on the road and you hear, yes, the indicator is on, it's confirmed, right? Next up, UI sounds, they increase accessibility, right? Accessibility to your product. So sound supports users with visual cognitive impairments, especially visual impairments, right? So it improves the kind of inclusivity and broadens your reach to a wider audience. So for example, in Australia, I bring up a pretty random example, but hopefully it makes sense. But in Australia, when you cross the street and you go to the lights, you press the pedestrian cross button and you wait for the green man to pop up. But there's also, it's accompanied by this really iconic sound, which goes, and it's really loud, extremely loud. It's very iconic, very funny, actually, now that I think about it. But if you've been there, you'll know this sound, actually. But it's just to say that that sound is used so that everybody, no matter who you are, can cross the road, not just the ones who can actually see this little green man, right? Finally, the last reason why I say UI sounds are important for your product is, of course, they differentiate your brand. This is an obvious one, but you know, just like your visual logo or your visual identity, those two things, there's a lot of effort put into them, right? There's a lot of design process, even money. And these are kind of those signature elements of your brand, right? Your logo, your visual identity, your look, your feel. But sound is also just as much, if not more, a powerful signature element for your brand. And if you do it well, it can really mean you stand out against everybody else in the market, right? Sound, I will argue, is the easiest way for you to stand out. Very efficient, relatively much cheaper as well, right? Great, that's enough. But let's move on to what a great UI sound does. You can really pack it down into two parts, I would say. It does two things in parallel. So when you hear a sound, a short sound, it conveys a meaning, right? An action for your product, right? It makes an interaction easier and smoother. That's the functional aspect. It conveys the intended meaning. That's the brain part, the rational part. Then there's the emotional aspect, that more intuitive aspect, the emotional appeal. So sound is by far the most emotional tool in your design toolbox. It really, really is. Film composers or directors know this, game companies know this, and products are getting to know this fact more and more. But yeah, so great UI sounds, they do these two things in parallel. It's very cool. They convey a function, improve usability on one hand, but they also please the listener. And perhaps the listener wants to interact more because of the sound. And they also convey the brand identity, all in just a few seconds. Really amazing stuff, really cool stuff. And that emotional appeal aspect, the second part, is what we're going to dive into today and what we're going to talk about. Sound is emotional, right? Like I see a lot of emojis there. Emojis are a form of emotions, right? Some good emojis. Sound is emotional. Hopefully that was appealing to you. It was to me, at least, as the host. Okay, so where to start when making a great UI sound? It's important to start way before you even make the sound itself. That sounds annoying, but it's true, and I'll walk you through it. So there's kind of 4 main questions you need to answer before you make the sound. This is what we do, and you should do. First up, brand goals. Who's the brand? Who is the product? What are their goals? Are you innovative? Are you forward-thinking? Or on the other hand, are you a familiar brand? Are you a human brand, right? So for example, if you know yourself, you know, okay, we're a premium brand, then actually premium sounds are a very, very, very simple, efficient, cheap way to portray that brand, right? And convey that aspect. So get to know your brand first, right? Next, user preferences. Firstly, who are your users, right? What ages, demographics, and always know we're designing for the user. We're not designing for designers, even though we like to, we're designing for users. So who are we designing for? If it's 80 plus, your target audience perhaps don't have those dubstep UI sounds, right? Sounds obvious, but again, very important to look into your user and their preferences. Next up, look into the context. So by context, I mean, when the sound is heard, when the UI sound comes out of your product and is heard, where is that? What's the environment? Where is the user at the time? What's the time of day that can affect it, morning versus evening? At least it affects me when I hear a abrasive, you know, really fast tempo piece of music in the morning. It's a little too much, right, for me. So it's important to know, where is your user? What time of day? Even what mood are they in? I know this sounds really high level thinking, but if you start to ask these questions, you will actually unpack a lot. For example, the environment where the sound is heard. What if it's heard in a loud factory environment, right, where people are working and there's a lot of ambient noise? Therefore, it tells you, okay, the sound needs to be loud. Perhaps it needs to be higher in pitch so we can hear it. You know, we naturally, our ears hear those high frequencies stronger or better. And it tells you a lot of things, right? A lot of things, you know, for appliances, if an appliance is in a kitchen setting, right? And you have a lot of, again, kitchen ambient noise, you have to know that, the context, the environment, and that will inform what sound to make. And finally, the question you need to ask yourself is understanding the limitations, get to know the limitations of your products. For example, the classic one is speaker. Sounds come out of a speaker. It might be a piezo speaker, or even better, what we like is a polyphonic speaker. They're the normal speakers that we know of. So especially for things like appliances and smaller products, I mean, if you have nice speakers, great. You don't have to worry too much about the limitations. But if you have smaller speakers, understand the limitations. What kind of range are we working within here? Understand and analyze those limitations. And again, once you know that, you'll start to form, or once you answer these 4 questions, you start to form a box, right? And this box are the boundaries or limitations with which you can work within. So you say, okay, here's the boundaries. It has to be loud. It has to be high pitched. It has to be for this user, this target audience, this brand, blah, 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 blah. Then you make the sound. Easy, right? No, but it really is quite simple once you have those down packed. So great, let's move on to sound's role in your product. So ask yourself then, what would you like sound in your product to improve, right? What are your needs? Is it to improve functionality? Do you want to improve functionality within your product? Sound, simple, easy way to do that. If you know that, if that's the sole purpose, then therefore the UI sounds can be very simple, functional, right? Minimal, maybe even fairly generic. What if you say to us or to yourself, I want to increase the physicality. So say you're an app with a screen and you go, oh, it's so annoying, it's not physical. I want to create that satisfying tactile feeling. Go to sound. Sound is your go-to there, right? Also, of course, graphic UI as well. But sound is amazing. For example, a button, you know, a screen has no sound, but if you press or have a sound that goes down, up, right? It's a classic, very simple way to create tactility, satisfaction, so on and so forth. What about creating emotion? Is that what you want to do in your product? Again, as we all know, sound is great for that. So do you want to create moments of achievement within the user experience? Perhaps happy moments, or even inspiring kind of beautiful moments, right? Sound is, even within 3 seconds, you can create a very inspiring feeling. That's what audio logos do for brands, right? Or Netflix, right? It's not so inspiring, but you get what I mean. It's highly emotional. Next up, do you want to convey your brand identity? You have a strong brand identity, hopefully. You can convey that and tie that closely with sound. So for example, if you are a premium brand, you can easily, quite simply create premium sounds. Easily, simply, efficiently, yes. Are you a playful brand? Again, you can create playful sounds, or at least portray that through the sound. Are you innovative? So on and so forth. Do you want to match motion and visuals? You have cool motion, cool visuals. Do you want to closely pair that to sound or sync it to sound? So for example, a toggle tuk-tuk is a classic one where you move across the screen. That adds that satisfying feeling to a product. Or finally, do you just want to be memorable? I want to be recallable as a brand. I want people to remember us. Again, sound is your go-to. It really is. That's why audio logos are so abundant these days, because sound is the second most memorable sense, if I said that correctly, after smell, right? So sound and music, as we all know, the Star Wars theme song, the Mario Kart I played earlier, right? We all remember specifics, actually. You know, we all remember the rhythm and the tune of, or the melody of that Mario song I just played earlier. Highly recallable. So you could say, actually, we want all these things, John. Well, sound can do all of them. Or you just want to prioritize one or two of these things, you can do that. And I will say, the sooner you ask yourselves all these questions I've just gone through, the sooner sound can be incorporated into your design process, the better. The better, rather than it being an afterthought. Perhaps you can give a thumbs up if you've had experience of sound being an afterthought before. We've definitely had that experience, trust me, as a sound design agency. Yeah, I can come there. So let's get it earlier in the design process, right? The big players in the game, the Apple, so on and so forth, they do this. Get on the bandwagon, as they say, right? Cool. So now let's talk about emotionally appealing sounds. Creating them. How do we create them? Good question. Well, what we want to do in essence is we want to create positive experiences through sound. These approach responses. By that, I mean, you want to create a UI sound that urges the user towards the product. They want to interact more with the product, right? They want to press that button again or go towards a certain route in the user journey, whatever it might be, right? But you want to urge them towards the product rather than move away from the product, right? That's obvious, but you don't want to do that. So some examples of these positive experiences with sound, just in general, not UI sounds, is, for example, when your favorite song comes on, you've been listening to Spotify, say, for the past 30 minutes, and then your favorite song comes on out of the blue. You're kind of urged, or if you're like me, to turn it up just a little bit, right? So it's kind of urging you towards a certain action, right? Towards the product. Or the sound of cooking. We all know and love the sound of cooking. Also the smell, but the sound, right? The sound is really important, and it can attract you to the kitchen, right? Or at least, if you're like me, the sound of egg frying on a pan, I love that sound. Kind of warm, it's somehow cozy, and it attracts you to the kitchen. It's an enticing sound, unless you're vegan, of course. I'm sorry to the vegans. Yeah. But it's just to explain, this is just one example of how sound does that to us, or when it's done well, these positive sounds. Whereas what you want to avoid using is sounds that push users away from the product, right? Further away, these avoidance responses. We all kind of know this, or I know it at least with my morning alarm. I have it on a phone and it plays a tune, and it's really annoying. And actually it's great because it urges me to turn it off, right? So that can also actually be intentional. Usually usually you don't want these negative experiences, these avoidance responses through sound, but you can actually use it intentionally, which we also know, like I say, from a morning alarm sound. So they're kind of intentionally harsh. They lack any kind of branded element or human touch or organic feel. So these generic and computer-like sounds, it's very straight, computer-like, boxy. They kind of grab our attention, right? In a bad way, which in this case is intentional. These are the beeps, the infamous beeps we all know from our products. It's a hangover from a previous time. So the reason I say all of this, these positive experiences, is because we want to create, the sounds you create for your products, they're going to be heard many times, perhaps 1,000+ times, 10,000 times, right? So these sounds, they need to remain pleasant after being heard so many times, right? Now, it's not so hard, don't worry. One easy way to fix this is just try it out. Listen to the sound on repeat in different times of day, different environments, test it yourself, right? And just see, is it pleasant after that amount of time? Because after 1,000+ times, 10,000 times of listening to the sound, you start to get used to the sound, right? Like the Netflix sound we heard. Oh no, I didn't play it, but I mimed it for you or mouthed it for you. But like the Netflix sound, right? You hear it often enough that eventually it starts to trigger this kind of conditioned response or a feeling in you. And sometimes we call that Pavlovian response, right? So it's when you get so used to something, it eventually triggers this kind of automatic response. So for example, take this, you receive a incoming notification. If that is yours, I'm sorry if it's not, I had to pick one, but this is a common one. But if you hear that sound, it's proven that this can trigger dopamine, right? After hearing it so many times, you might even get excited. If you hear it enough, for example, if you're falling in love, maybe, with somebody, and you hear this sound enough, it starts to create a really, really, really in-depth, big emotional, impactful feeling, much more than the sound itself, right? So it's really powerful. If you use it consistently over a long period of time, and it is pleasant and a good sound, then it can convey a lot more than just the simple ting that or ding that it is originally. Or if you're like me and notice in this image, you might actually get anxious at seeing how many emails there are. So that same sound could induce anxiety. If you just see 4,707 go up to 8, it's, I mean, too much, right? No, only joking. But sounds, of course, like the morning alarm, once heard enough, they kind of start to trigger these responses and actions in us. That was a lot about all these positive responses, how this Pavlovian response, all this kind of stuff. But let's actually step back now and break down sound itself. I would like to do that because then we can learn how to create a positive, pleasant sound that can be heard so many times, right? A branded sound. So let's break down sound into its separate components. I call these, obviously, the pillars of sound. There's 5 pillars of sound. First of all, you probably have heard of it or know of it or whatever, perhaps not, is called melody. So when you hear music or sound or a UI sound, it typically has a melody. And the melody is just a sequence of different notes or sequence of notes. So da, 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 that's a melody, right? A rising melody. The melody is the singable part, like I just did. It's the memorable part of a UI sound. And you can also adapt it to create positive emotions or negative. So for example, typically a upward contour or motion in a melody, so da-da, has that positive kind of connotation. And likewise, da-dum has a kind of more negative ending connotation, generally speaking, right? Then you have rhythm. So rhythm is the timing of the notes I just sang. So for example, da, 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 is different to da, da, da. It's the same notes, it's the same melody, it's just different rhythm, timing of the notes. So this is where you kind of tie in tension and release, these really good things we use in sound and music. But you can also use silence to create all these kinds of push and pull emotions, right? Or you can use it to go fast. So if you want an urgent sound, or slow if you want to be a little more premium, da, 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 or lower, dum, dum, dum. I'm so sorry about my singing, but hopefully you can put up with it for a bit longer. I do have some audio files coming. Then we have harmony, right? And harmony is when there's multiple notes played beneath it. I won't do it for you now because I would need a choir behind me to do it. But harmony is the thing that really adds that emotional depth. So you can add a happy chord or a sad chord. So this can really make a simple dun-dun. If you add a harmony beneath it, it can become even more positive, right? Then you have dynamics. This is the variation of loudness. So this is where you create contrast. And as we know in design, contrast is super important, especially to make it more human, right? In UI sounds, we want to make emotionally appealing sounds. So generally they want to be more human appealing, right? So by that, I mean, if you do the same dynamic, same loudness, it's a little bit computer-like, but if you go dum, louder, right? It adds a bit of human organic touch. Now bear with me, we're going somewhere. Finally, the last pillar of sound, if we break it down, is timbre. It's a fancy, weird word. But that just means if the violin plays the melody, da da da, or a guitar, down down down, or a piano, dum dum dum, or me singing it, la la la, right? The difference of all those is the difference in timbre. You can also think of it as instrument, the difference in instrument. Now timbre, why I'm getting to this, is timbre is really the place where you can hone in or tie in the brand personality, the brand identity, right? So let's dive into that. The good news is, everyone, you don't need to know all this music stuff. I just wanted to break down sound for you so that you can get a little insight. And that's kind of also the point of these webinars. But don't worry, you don't have to learn music theory or know about all these pillars of sound. You can also just mouth it yourself. So what do I mean by that? Well, a simple way for sounds to be functional, easy to understand, while also clearly communicating universal emotions, right? Going back to what I originally said, having functional UI sounds that also clearly communicate these universal emotional aspect. A clear way to do that is to look around you in the world and find these common symbols of communication around you. The language of sound, and especially in UI sound, is around you. So look around and find those. Now I'll do that for you now. So for example, one of the most kind of emotional forms of communication we have is the human voice, which I'm talking to you with right now. There's a contour, da-da-da-da, to when you talk, da-da-da-da, right? There's always a melody, some kind of melodic element. So when you're saying certain simple phrases or simple communicative phrases that pack a lot in, for example, uh-huh, uh-huh. You know when you agree and you go, uh-huh, yep, uh-huh, like that? Just notice that's a simple form of communication, right? But it's very universal. We all understand that, everyone in this chat or this call now. So notice that it kind of goes up, da-da. It has this upwards contour. That's called intonation, by the way, when it's regards to the voice. But it moves upwards in a positive way, uh-huh. On the flip side, though, what about uh-uh, uh-uh? Notice that now it's going downwards. And we all understand that, no, disagree or whatever it might be, right? And notice that the contour, it goes downwards, right? So it's got that more negative connotation. So why am I saying this? Well, what you can do, these are the tricks, right? This is how you make these emotionally appealing sounds, is mimic these realities around us, mimic this language that we have in the world that we all universally understand. So copy the melody. Uh-huh, da-da, copy that. Copy the rhythm, the timing, da-da, the dynamics, the harmony. And then ask yourself the big question, what timbre? Because it's probably not going to be you recording yourself, your voice, right, and using that as UI sound. You have to then decide what is the timbre, the instrument that plays it. So this, as I said earlier, is really the timbre. This element is really where you can inject your brand personality. So if you're an innovative tech-related brand, you might choose a sound to play that da-da in a more kind of synthesized or contemporary sound you might choose. Whereas if you're a human and relatable brand, you might choose to play that dun-dun with the guitar or piano or some kind of familiar instrument that we all understand, right, to convey that brand identity. So let me just play you an example of mimicking that uh-huh with the UI sound. I'll play it again. Super simple. We've all heard sounds like this, right? But it really, what I'm trying to say is that it mimics reality, right? It mimics a language we all understand, right? But then it's done in a softer way that is a bit more branded, right? According to that brand. I hope that makes sense. We can also do the same with right? So do the same exercise, copy the melody, da-da, the rhythm, the harmony, the dynamics, and then ask yourself what instrument should play it, right? As I said earlier. Let's listen to a sound of mimicking that universal language in sound. Right? I've also got these little toggle icons there for you because these sounds could be paired nicely with the toggle. But I hope you all understand that, we can, once again, these extremely simple two-note sounds can portray quite a lot, right? They can communicate a lot quickly within a few seconds or half a second. So, simply, minimally, quickly communicate this universal idea. It's subconscious. I'm breaking it down for you now, so it's more conscious. But it's perceived as it's perceived in a subconscious manner, right? So by tapping into these relatable forms of communication, like the voice, we really win a lot. You win functionality, and you win emotion, right? Because the functional aspect of is there. We understand that university. No, we're going it's going downwards. So it's kind of a disagreement. So you can use that functional aspect of it, but at the same time, it's emotional. It's negative. Or likewise, the other sound is positive, right? So you're actually winning functionality and emotion just by copying that simple vocal idea, right? Cool. Let's move on. So then you might ask, okay, this timbre thing I'm talking about, or the choice of instrument, it sounds quite important. And it is relatively, but let's just break that down a little bit, because that is one of the main things that defines your brand personality, is the instrument that you choose, right? So what timbre to choose? Well, this is a really complex topic, I must say. This is a topic of sound design now. It could be a webinar in itself, so you can give a thumbs up if you would like that to happen. But it's a whole thing in itself. We'll leave that for another time. I will just give you some kind of general rules to follow now while we're here, while we're on the topic. Soft, generally, a soft timbre or soft instrument is generally more pleasant. So is more pleasant than right? It sounds obvious, but these are these rules, right? Likewise, the is more harsh, but it's therefore you can use it for more urgent sounds. Acoustic timbres, acoustic instruments are more human. Likewise, or on the other hand, electronic sounds are typically more innovative. Lower pitch sounds are typically more premium, so lower down here. Whereas high pitch might be more playful, right? Round and short sounds like tuk tuk, these beautiful short and round sounds are typically more tactile and mechanical. Whereas reverberant and long, da-da, are very like final and branded sounds, so on and so forth. This goes on forever, and we might be able to touch this in another webinar. But it's just to say that just be aware when you're listening to UIs next time that this stuff is actually happening behind the scenes, so to say. Cool, so now we're talking a lot about brand personality. What I want to do is just talk about the kind of physical design language and visual design language that you use in your products, and how to pair sounds to that product personality. So let's break that down. So especially if you're a physical product, you might have materials and textures, right? Whether it's wood, aluminium, rubber, whatever it might be. This exercise I'm about to go into, it also applies to digital experiences as well. But let's dive into materials and texture. So this in front of you, if I asked you, bear with me, if I asked you which sound suits this better, do do do, or sing sing sing, probably, I don't have a poll open, but probably, I hope a lot of you think, I know most of you think the first sound is the more suited to this material of wood in front of you. Now, this sounds simple, but think about it. That's super amazing that we all agree that me just saying do 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 or sing sing sing, you all agree it's a very simple sound, right? I'm not singing a melody or anything. I'm just saying these sounds with my mouth. And we all kind of agree which suits that better. So I'm just trying to hone in how you can really tie sound closely with materials here, right? Let's try it again. What about now? Do, 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 or sing, sing, sing. Perhaps now you're leaning more towards the second. This is misleading because you can see it's got the rivets in it. So if you did it accurately, it might sound a little different. But I hope you get my point here, right? Let's look at shapes then. So when you're designing, you have buttons, you use shapes, all these kind of things. So let's break down shapes. What about now? Do, 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 sing, sing, sing. Which one? Probably the first. How about now? Maybe don't sing, right? What about now? Perhaps ka, ka, ka. How about now? Perhaps fa, fa, fa. Right? Sounds ridiculous, but I hope you follow me. Now, sing, sing, sing. We finally have it, right? So once again, I'm just trying to hone in that we all kind of agree upon this stuff. It's amazing, right? So there's these kind of universal forms of communication that we all understand. Very, very powerful. What about colors? Final one, colors. Colors, it's a bit more subjective, but let's try it out. So there's a lot of universalities when it comes to colors, actually. So we're heavily influenced by nature, right, when it comes to colors. So there's a big array of colors around, you know, there's greens, blues in the sky and the water, there's yellows, all these kinds of things, right? I'm not going into color too much, color theory, don't pin me on that. But I'm just saying that I think we can all agree in this exercise I'm about to do, to some extent, even with colors. So green, you see in front of you. Green reflects nature somewhat, at least for me. At least there's an abundance of trees, plants around us, right? Green. How about yellow? Closely tied to the sun. It's bright, energetic, happy. Or blue. Reflective of water, calm, even serious, cold tone. Pink. Probably playful, even childlike. Red. Color of danger. Cool. So that was subjective. That was something different, right? Abstract. But I kind of feel, I can guess, and I hope I'm not too off here, that we all somewhat agree on those sounds, right? Pretty amazing what sound can do. I was talking, by the way, through those sound examples, kind of doing a live narration above it. I don't know if you could hear that, but sorry if you couldn't. Anyway, so once again, there's no need to worry about pairing the right sound with the right color, or knowing color theory, or knowing how materials sound, or shapes, all these things this exercise we just did. No need to look into that, right? We're just breaking it down for you now. You can also, like I say, just once again, just mouth it yourself. Always go back to that. These things are intuitive. They're within us. They're internalized in us, all these things we're just experiencing, right? So they're in you. It's intuitive. So just mouth it yourself. For example, last one, you're a cheaper product, say. I know you're probably not a cheaper product, but if you were a cheaper product, maybe you talk a bit like this, right? Up here, and you a little bit faster, right? Way up. Bear with me. Now you're an expensive product, right? Maybe you talk a little bit lower and you go down a bit, right? The pitch is low now, but also I use silence. It's slow, it's soft, it's more dynamic, right? So I hope, again, you kind of, that makes sense to you. But it's just to say, trust your instincts, trust your intuition. It's within you. Yeah, cool. So in summary, I hope all that made sense. I hope it was good fun. But in summary, just so we go back to follow that red thread, right? Start, before you make the sound, by taking insights, research into brand. Who are you as a brand? Who are your users? What do they like? What do they want from the product? Look at your product. What are the limitations that we have to work within, right? Remember that box. Product personality. Ask yourself, does the product sound like it looks as well, right? Materials, shapes, colors, right? We just dived into. Or if you don't want to do all that, just mouth it, right? Like I say, mimic existing languages of communication around you. Copy it, mimic reality, right? Cool. Great. So that was all for now. If you enjoyed it, I hope you did. I will actually just tell you what happens next time, because this was part 2 of a 3-part series, as I said. So next time, we're going to talk about UI sounds within a user journey, right? Creating a red thread is really important with UI sounds. We'll talk about building a cohesive soundscape across all your touch points, product touch points, so how it can be a really cohesive brand experience, right? And then finally, we'll talk about validating the sounds. So once you make the sounds, how do you know if they're good? How do you know if they're performing in the way that you intended them to perform? That's what we're going to talk about. Thank you.
And with that,
yeah,
we'll do the Q&A now. Lots of questions have come in. Thank you all so much. Really great to see, and just keep them coming. We've got 17 minutes-ish to do Q&A before the time is up. So I'll just get started by picking some of the exciting questions. And yeah, see if you can answer them, John. So this one is, let me just see here. This is a fun one from Debjit. He's saying, when I order my food, I go through a sonic traffic jam because there are so many sounds in a span of 3 seconds. The first sound you have is like a payment confirmation. The second is your food getting prepared. And then third, you get your bank notification when you've successfully transferred, I guess. Is there a way to disrupt this system or make it more cohesive?
100%. Great question. This is a problem, so to say. One of the problems with UI sounds is when they're used too often, or at least too quickly. So what we're going to talk about next time is within a user journey, because you're saying, Debjit, as I understand it, that in the user journey, you go from here to here to here quite quickly and hear different sounds that perhaps don't relate to each other either. So there's many things you can do there, many things. We'll talk about it next time, but I'll just quickly say, know your priorities, which is the most important sound. Get that down first, right? If it's the bank transaction at the end, then make that the priority, and perhaps use silence for the others. Knowing when to use silence is just as important as knowing when to use sound, right? Really important point there. So know your priorities, and then say, okay, if we need the sounds, all 3 of them, say, you probably don't, but say you need all the sounds, then what you do is you look to design the sounds that they work together, right? That it sounds like a natural user journey, a natural progression. For example, the first sound could be dong, next dong, the next dong. I know that's comical, but it's just to say there's ways to go around that. But great question. Hope I answered it somewhat.
Next question is from Anonymous, wondering if the sound designer, in this case, that would be you or one of our colleagues, John, can also help with the implementation and adjusting the sound to fit a certain product. In this case, they mean in terms of frequency, loudness, etc.
Yeah, really good question. I mean, if you're asking us, we always help with that. Yeah, we always do. Typically, sound designers, they should, but no, it's the person who has the product who implements the sounds. But the sound designer should have control over that, because the volume of the sounds is very important. The frequency, all these kinds of things I think you were talking about in the question are very important. But yes, we do think about that a lot. And actually, it is a topic perhaps I should talk about more in the next webinar, is implementation, because that is a huge thing, is delivering the sounds and then putting them into the product in the right way, with the right volume, with all those things, right? So it plays correctly, so on and so forth. So yeah, but generally speaking, if you ask us, it is something that we take care of.
Here's another great question. This is from Vicente asking, when designing sound for a brand that already has a strong visual identity, do you try to match the sound to the visual cues in a synesthetic way? Sorry.
Really cool question. Short answer, no. No. Okay, there's 2 parts. To the synesthesia part, no, because it's too subjective. Although it's going a little counter to what I just did, because we all listened and saw colors on the screen and kind of agreed upon that. That was something else. That was more a universal physical aspect of sound. But synesthesia, I think, is a little too personal or subjective to dive into that. You can tap into it though, which is fun as a creative way. But to your first part of the question, yes, we 100%. If you create sounds after the visual identity has been created, we always pair that to the visual identity. We never create new sounds that aren't paired to that. It should always closely match that. And that's why I talked about the product, the shapes, the colors, the materials, because it should closely tie to the visual identity always.
Yeah, great questions. Here's another one from an anonymous person asking, how could you create a sound that is meant to be tied to a negative or problematic function without being distasteful?
Really good question. This is a fun topic. I love this, creating negative sounds, because it's a challenge. What you do is you try not to annoy the user, first of all, because if it's a error or a negative sound that is heard often, you don't want to annoy them. Oh, I just never want to hear that sound again. Therefore, they don't interact with the product, right? You want to avoid that. So you want to create a sound that is somewhat pleasant, but communicates the function. There's many types of negative sounds that we can go into another time, but if you want to communicate, there's simple ways of doing it. But like I say, you want to just have that short moment. You don't want a long UI sound for a negative sound. You want a short one that gets to the point, quickly communicates something was wrong, like the I did, although that wasn't highly negative, I will say. But it's just say short, get to the point, but don't annoy, because it might be heard 10,000 times.
Here's another question from anonymous again. How do you validate your designed sound icons, logos, animation, etc.?
Yeah, great question. We will dive into that in the next part of the webinar. But just quickly, we test. We user test with potential users, target audiences, with existing users, ourselves, the creative teams who design all these things, whether it's sound design or the visual team as well, or physical design, test on the product, see if it works, see if it's functioning the way you want. But we also, at least at Sonic Minds, our agency, we partner with testing agencies who are pros in that field. So there are a lot of testing companies that know how to do this, and we're partners with those. So we kind of, with them, we test it in a rigorous manner to know that the functionality holds up, the brand attributes or the emotions are coming through, and all that good stuff. But that's, yeah, it's a bigger topic, but it's a good question. Yeah.
Great. Then we've got a question from Danilo asking, the amount and type of sounds an app will have, is that something that usually comes from the brand, or is it a decision made by the sound designers?
Sorry, the type and
the amount.
The amount. Yeah. Usually both. It's a collaboration, because it's the brand who doesn't want to, okay, it's the brand who knows the users the best, not the sound designer, right? Important to remember. So the brand can say, we know our users, I think they will get annoyed at this, but it's also important, it's collaboration, right? Between both parties, because it's also important for the sound designer who creates it. They know the intention behind it. They know when to use it, why to use it, and all these good stuff. They're the pros, the creatives. So they come and they say, or we come and we say to a brand, you should do this. Perhaps you should use silence here, and come with that expertise. But the brand, of course, also has a say, right? So a company like Apple, it will be a collaboration between the two.
Great. Then we have a great question from Cheng saying, hey, John, great to see you again, and thanks for the webinar. In the age of rapidly advancing AI tools, how can we uphold the integrity of Sonic branding research and communicate the unique value of real, human-led, qualitative insights to brands that may be tempted by faster automated solutions?
Great question, very topical. I understand right now. Perhaps this topic might die down, hopefully in the future a little, but it is very prevalent. I'm not so worried. I think what we do is bespoke, right? It's non-generic, and as it stands today, AI can't create the bespoke, custom, beautifully emotionally appealing sounds, because like I broke down in front of you now, hopefully in the webinar, you understand there's a lot behind it, right? Even if it's a simple sound at the end, there's a lot behind it. Especially if you want to create that bespoke experience that is paired very closely to your brand. That can't be done yet. So what I mean is, if the brief is to make something that is extremely premium, very blue, and this and that and that and X, Y, Z, and it's very, very tight brief, it's still just better to always get it done like this, I just have to say. Was there another part of the question I'm missing?
It was mostly relating to AI and sort of the integrity of it as well.
Yeah, how we can keep the integrity. Speak about it, talk about it, discuss it. I think there's a lot happening out there about keeping the integrity. But who knows, perhaps there's going to be a human certified stamp soon coming out, right?
I'll also add there's a legal aspect to this. That's a huge topic with AI in both music, visuals, everything, copy, even text that's being written. Currently, we're in this kind of crazy Wild West period of AI where everyone's using it, but we're seeing more and more cases of lawsuits and all that. And if you really want to prevent all this stuff, yeah, have human beings use it, because then you know who to actually charge against, I guess you can say.
And I will also just add finally, you can't trust that it's working as it is, right? You always have to make it by a human and test it on humans at the end of the day. That's just how it's always going to work. Yeah, but great question.
Björn just added in a quick comment here, just to add, you can't copyright music or sound if it's purely made by AI. So for bigger corporations, that's a no-go, because they have to copyright their sounds.
Yep.
Here's another great question. There's so many questions, it's amazing. And if we don't get to all of them, please just send us an email or hit up John or myself.
By the way, the QR code in front of you isn't random. It should go to my LinkedIn. So just hit me up there for these questions as well.
Here's another great question from Anonymous. How can UX and UI sounds improve the functionality and sensorial experience of home appliances, as like a kitchenware or something?
Really good question. It's a field that is moving quickly, we see. So brands are picking up on sound much more and more, because typically these appliance brands have these beeps and these older sounds with p.2 speakers. But now brands are picking up on it and know that it's a really kind of easy, simple, efficient way to create a better experience with the product is through sound, right? Through these UI sounds. Was the part I was missing? Can you just repeat that? Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
So I feel like there was just one point.
It was just how we improve the functionality and the sensorial experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so sounds, as you've just said, they improve the functionality. Well, they can dramatically. So if it's an appliance, warning sounds, critical alert sounds, whatever they might be, power on sounds are branded moments. But you have, there's kind of a range, right? You have highly informative sounds, which appliances have, like don't do this, or don't touch that, or this is hot, or whatever it is, right? And then you have branded sounds on the other side of the spectrum, which is a little power on sound or a branded moment, right? Then you have all the other sounds in between. But you can really convey a lot of function while someone's away from the product, right? So for an appliance, you're in a kitchen, I think you said, or wherever it is, the appliance, while you're away from that, you can actually get that functionality from being away, but in a pleasant way. That isn't a bip or these abrasive sounds that we are so used to, because we're moving on from that, and speakers are getting cheaper and better. Yeah, hope that answers it.
Another question from Anonymous is, can sound design be universal? I.e., what means in UK can mean something else in China?
Yeah, great question. Sound can be universal. It definitely can. For example, a bit like take a sigh, for example. By sigh, I mean, a bit like, I'm sad, or I'm bored, or something. That's a kind of, we do that naturally as humans, right? This kind of relaxation, putting the shoulders down, going downwards, right? So there's this universality in sound, which you don't get as much in other forms of communication. So definitely there are ways to get around that, because I do understand your point. There might be, in Australia, there's certain kind of ways you say something which sounds a bit odd, which you couldn't use elsewhere. But there's definitely, at the core of sound, there are universalities. And it's a really cool topic, which I want to dive into more. But yeah, great question.
I always feel like if there's any universal language, it's music and
Yes.
sound, right? There's so many interesting, I don't know, did we mention Kiki Booba last time? Maybe not. But there's like this great phenomenon, no matter where you are in the world, people will associate the same thing with the sound Kiki or Booba. One will be more associated with something spiky, and the other with something more round and sort of soft.
Just like in the shapes exercise, right? That's why we did it. I think we all agreed, wherever you're from, that a circle is do-do and a triangle is zing-zing-zing, right? Sounds ridiculous, but I was actually trying to portray this universality behind sound. Yeah.
Cool. Then we've got, I know we're almost out of time here. This is another anonymous question. In what specific way can our products, I don't know what the company is, but stand out from competitors through sound design? And what would be our sound if we are premium?
I would need a lot more variables to know what your sound would be, because it's more than just premium. But like I mentioned, if your sound is premium, it's generally like I had that exercise, lower pitched, more time, all these kinds of things, right? So I was trying to hone in that you can, with simple parameters, you can create these brand attributes through sound. But yeah, if it's premium, I mean, I need to know more. What are your other brand attributes? Who are you? What colors do you use? Who do you want to be? Who are your users? For example, if you're a premium brand who's from this part of the world, say Northern Europe, where we are in Denmark, premium might sound slightly different to somewhere else, or perhaps you want to be premium, but there's so much that goes into it. But sound is by far the easiest way to actually convey that premium aspect of your brand through sound, because it's very easy with sound to be unique, very easy. You can just choose a certain melody, a certain instrument, and before you know it, there's no chance of others sounding like that. When it's bespoke done, not when it's generic sound, but when it's bespoke done like we do, it's very quick and easy to sound different and unique, but still premium. But yeah, we need to have a talk. Hit me up on LinkedIn and we can talk more about those get deeper, because that's why I said making the sound actually happens way before you even start to make the sound. So there's a whole research period of knowing how to differentiate yourself against other premium brands, right? Because that's the thing, your competitors are premium as well. So yeah, but totally doable.
I'll find time for one more question before we have to shut down the call. This is from Paul, asking, how common is it for products to have digital or pre-recorded sounds designed that play in parallel with a mechanical sound to enhance the experience? That could be like connecting the controllers to a Nintendo Switch. He guesses that's a plausible way to help make cheaper or less tactile materials feel more premium.
Yes. Very cool. Yeah, it's almost like haptics, using vibrations as well. Like physical, if you're turning a knob and it has a physicality or little indents, yeah, you can add a sound to that. You have to be aware about the latency so that it's really in sync, so it passes off as being the real mechanical sound. And that's to another point, that you want the sound to sound mechanical then and pair nicely with the real mechanical sound. But yeah, totally. If you're a physical product where things are clicked in, or there are mechanical sounds with knobs and everything, then definitely the sound designer, or if it were me, you would look at pairing it very closely without latency, so it passes off as being the coolest, most wow experience ever. For example, take a door. You walk into a car, I won't say a brand, but you walk into a nice car, perhaps an EV, or no, I'm not going to say anything. And you close the door. There's the mechanical, but perhaps there's also a little something else, right? Just to add a bit of
luxury,
right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, great, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We hope you'll tune in for future webinars. If you missed part 1, definitely go back and watch that. John touches on a lot of interesting topics for that. And please do not hesitate to reach out, ask questions, reach out to John through the QR code, or just search for him directly on LinkedIn. Yeah, always happy to help.
Yeah, this was great. And I really love all these questions. So do hit me up, because it's also interesting for me. Great.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
See you next time.